Welcome to the set of Renewed, and we are here with Malorie Salem, who has recently received into the Catholic Church. We'll hear a little bit about her story and her journey from Mississippi to Houston to full communion with the church just last May. So Malorie, thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mentioned your Mississippi background. So how did you get to Houston, first of all?
So my now husband is in oil and gas. He's a chemical engineer. So, of course, that brought us from Mississippi to Texas, just like most people, I'm sure. But yeah, we've been here about 3 years now in Houston. So
Yeah, how have you found the city?
I really like it. I feel like as big as it is, it's really diverse and it's pretty laid back. I mean, the traffic's pretty horrible, but I've gotten used to it. And we actually just recently bought a house, so kind of making roots here as we just had our first child. So
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, and I'm sure
yeah.
we'll get to that. Now, as I also just mentioned, you weren't always Catholic, so sounds like your family were pretty devoted Baptists.
Yeah, I'll give you a little background. So I grew up Southern Baptist. Both my parents grew up Southern Baptist as well. And we were always super involved in church. You know, I mean, they dedicated me in the church. And then as I grew up, was baptized, you know, involved with the youth group, church choir, all the things. And then in college, you know, stayed mostly Baptist, but I had friends that were Catholic. So I started to kind of see the Catholic faith and kind of get involved and just go to mass with them sometimes. So it wasn't something completely new right before I converted. But once I'd met my husband and we started kind of getting serious, that's when we kind of talked about the fact that, you know, if we were going to get engaged, I would definitely look into RCIA for sure.
So there was never maybe a moment where Catholicism took you by surprise, as it were.
No, I mean, definitely so. I mean, because I grew up so devout Baptist that in my mind, I never thought I would convert. Like, even when I would go to mass with friends and things like that, and was approached about it, you know, of course, just having close friends that were Catholic, I was like, oh, I'll never be Catholic, you know, but that's when God has a sense of humor and says, you never say never, because he had different plans. So, definitely, you know, being, you know, married to someone and wanting to start a family, you know, you want to be on the same page on everything, and religion obviously is a big piece of life. So that's what kind of made me want to look into RCIA and actually look into the Catholic faith.
I look forward to hearing a little bit more about your thoughts on marriage and family in part 2 of this interview. As you considered the faith, which you had never considered before, considered Catholicism, what was easiest to accept?
With the Catholic faith, I feel like there's that intimidation factor because there's, you know, all these rituals and things, and you kind of think, oh, I wouldn't know what I was doing. It's easy because, you know, at the end of the day, it's based on Jesus Christ, and being Protestant, everything's based on Jesus Christ as well. So that was the super easy part. But other than that, when it came to different like nuances within the Catholic faith, I definitely was a little intimidated. Like, would I understand it? Or is it going to be something that's so confusing or so different than what I've originally believed that it might turn me away from it? But I will say during RCIA, Deacon Larry in one of the first sessions made the comment to just have an open heart and open mind. And I'd kind of come into it just like, oh, I've been reading the Bible for years. I've been going to church for years. Like, I'm not going to learn anything new out of this. And that was kind of eye-opening to say, like, oh, I really, you know, need to like take this very seriously and just have an open mind and like hear what the Catholic Church has to say, see what I learned from others in this process. And like having that attitude really made it a much more enjoyable and beneficial process for me. So
Great. If I may, maybe we can go just back a little bit. Like, you mentioned having an open mind yourself. Were there people growing up who may have had a closed mind to your Baptist faith at the time? Like people who would see going to church and ordering your life around God being something kind of foreign and strange?
I feel like growing up in the Bible Belt, I mean, I grew up in Mississippi, you know, I feel like church is just something kind of everyone did, whether people really believed or not. I feel like from talking to my husband, growing up Catholic in the South was a little harder because there's a lot of Protestants that don't necessarily think Catholics are Christian. He had like a lot of persecution, I guess, as he was growing up. Like, oh, you aren't saved. So that was another thing, is like when you grow up Protestant in the South, a lot of times, you kind of hear those things, what people say about Catholics. So when it comes to, joining the Catholic faith, there's a lot more like studying, because not only am I going to have that experience and I'm going to join myself and have to figure it out on my own, but how can I like explain to others like, oh, that you just misunderstood that. There's a lot of misinterpretations of the faith.
So it's kind of more an issue within Christianity rather than a conversation between Christianity and the outside world, at least for you.
For me, mostly. I mean, you definitely, come across those that don't believe. And that happens a lot more as you grow up, especially when I got into college, where you're kind of coming out of like I grew up in a small town, a lot of the same backgrounds and thought processes. And then you get into college, you get a lot different opinions, and you hear all these things, and you start to hear maybe why certain people don't believe. But I feel like coming in contact with that is always really good for your faith, because it helps you try to figure out how you need to explain it to others. At the end of the day, if you just always like go towards God to find those answers, then you can maybe help bring others in. But yeah, that definitely comes up for sure.
So there are many resources out there that I'm sure you, an avid reader, have discovered to help you along that journey, but and to help others too. I know that my college journey involved the Handbook of Christian Apologetics by Peter Kraft, who's a former Protestant. So that was an interesting read for me.
Okay, I might have to read that. Yeah, I haven't read that one.
So you mentioned the way that you have kind of engaged in dialogue with others, both Protestants and sometimes those outside the church. As you engaged in dialogue with your fellow RCIA members, sitting together during the Mass after the proclamation of God's Word, breaking it open, asking questions, do you have any memories that come back?
I will say that was one of my favorite parts of RCIA, was doing the breaking up in the Word. It was always great, really, in any kind of session, breaking up in the Word, and in our normal RCIA group meetings, just getting other people's perspective or seeing what their questions were. Because you had kind of all walks of life. You had people that were like me, that were raised in Christian homes. You had people that were raised in other types of homes, either non-Christian or just, no church going at all. And just and from different parts of the United States, like not from the Bible Belt like me. So it was always very interesting to see what type of questions or that they would bring up. Now with breaking up in the Word, the Bible works in the way you can read one verse one day and read it 10 days later and have a completely different meaning. So it was always neat to, after the homily, to go break up in the Word and actually see what it meant to each person. Sometimes we'd have group sessions where we all went around and said something, and then sometimes it was just people that wanted to talk. But I always enjoyed the ones where everyone kind of had to talk, because you really, it was always beneficial, because you never know what might be put on your heart. It might help someone else. So that was always really good to me.
Yeah, I think people are probably scared away from the faith by the sense that, Rome or, the Southern Baptist Conference or whoever is just going to now impose all of their beliefs upon me. They're going to rubber stamp me, and then I'm going to have to, drink their Kool-Aid, for the remainder of my days. It doesn't sound like that was the case.
No, I guess the atmosphere was always, you're welcome to ask whatever questions, but we're not forcing anything on you. And that, taking that pressure off really helps. And for me personally, I was doing this for one reason, because of my husband. And he made it very clear too that, this wasn't a pressure thing. It's like, if it works out that I become Catholic just like him, that's great. But it was more about my walk, not like, in order for us to get married, you need to be Catholic, And so there was no pressure there either. So it really was truly, I got to be my experience. And he got to come with me. So that was really nice too. And a lot of other couples did the same in the group.
That's great. He was your sponsor.
He wasn't. His mom was. And so that was neat too. So I got to get a lot closer to her, and she would come for the prayer mornings and the things that we would do during RCIA. That was really good.
Yeah, Matt also had his mother-in-law do the sponsorship. Yeah. So there's a way that the families grow.
It's cool.
Grow closer. Yeah. What was Saint Theresa like when you started to like get involved first with marriage prep and then with RCIA after marriage and all that?
Yeah, sure. So, being new to Houston, one of the first things we started doing was start to go to other churches and try to find a place. And so when we first came to St. Teresa, it was when I was in the gym. And so you think at first glance, you'd be like, we're not going to go to church in a gym. Like, why would we stay here? But at the very first of each Mass, they say all are welcome. And it really is that sense of community and that, no judgment here, just come in. And so it felt really welcoming. So we were like, oh, we'll keep coming back here. And so once we got engaged, because we got engaged once we were living in Houston, we decided to do marriage prep through St. Teresa's. And that's when we got kind of hooked up with Deacon Dwight, who did our marriage prep. And so not only did we do marriage prep, I also asked him a lot of questions about the Catholic faith and things like that. And he kind of asked me questions, and that kind of got the ball rolling into doing everything through St. Teresa and really my interest in, going through RCIA.
What questions would Deacon Dwight ask you?
Not really putting me on the spot, but it was always just kind of like, well, how do you know that? Or what makes you believe that? And I would say, well, I think this when we were talking about Catholic faith. And it makes you really notice that a lot of times growing up, or just like when you go to church or anything in any walk of life, sometimes you just listen to what people say, but you don't ever go see what backs it up. So it was always important that at the end of the day, everything Deacon Dwight would show me, he was able to back it up with the Bible. And especially as being a Protestant, the Bible, is the way. So really, got me in tuned with, okay, I really need to dig into this and not just go based off what people have said in the past, like really learn it. And that made a difference as well.
I think what may put some people off of the Catholic faith in particular, but faith in general, is maybe like at bottom, what's feared is an encounter with that great tradition that you mentioned, the tradition of Scripture, the tradition of the way that those in the church have interpreted it. Right? Because it's like now I have to let some of my unquestioned assumptions be challenged the way that Deacon Dwight was challenging you.
That's true, and because it's a lot to take in. This is, your faith is not a one and done type of thing. It's a lifetime journey. I mean, you can't learn everything at once, and you're never going to be the smartest person about it. So it's like understanding that there's that intimidation factor of, oh, I'm not going to know everything, and just realizing like take everything day by day and just, let God show you the way,
Yeah, Father Phil sets the tone of being welcoming and allowing each person to be where he or she's at on the journey. So he showed me a video. He actually showed me the video multiple times where Father David Michael Moses of St. Faustina, I think, in Fulshire, creates this video, a music video, where he says, hypocrites, well, we could use some. Yeah. There's certainly room here, right? So if you are not fully practicing your faith, if you don't fully know what your faith is, if you just are in that position of the man with an epileptic son in Mark's gospel, I have faith, but increase it.
Right.
Then I think St. Teresa is your place.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. We'll be back with part 2. Thank you, Malorie.
You're welcome.
Please like, subscribe, or comment below.